Good evening and welcome to this webinar on how to score 760 on the GMAT. My name is Rajat Sadana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT and I'm going to be your main host today. Supporting us in this webinar is Sandeep. Sandeep is a GMAT strategy expert at e-GMAT. He's helped upwards of 20,000 students with their GMAT journeys, and he's going to make sure that every question that you have gets answered. This is a strategy webinar. In this webinar, we'll help each one of you understand what it takes to get to that target GMAT score, whether it's a 700, whether it's a 760. We're going to help you understand how do you build that personalized study plan and what is important to execute that study plan successfully. We will also solve a couple of questions just to make sure we emphasize on the point as to what's important to execute on that study plan successfully. We always want you to learn, and it's one of the primary things that we're known for. And to make sure, for those of you who registered for this webinar, that you'd learn a few things, we did send a few video lessons your way. The video lessons were on boldface and word BD modifiers. There were also some video lessons on RC. In fact, there are a few on number properties and algebra as well. If you have registered on the e-GMAT platform, all you need to do is log into your e-GMAT account to access these video lessons. We also have some upcoming free sessions. We have a proctored mock test that is tomorrow, which is a quant workshop. Think of that mock test as, or quant workshop as a mock test on a supercharged mock test, in which we not only tell you an accurate estimate of your score range, but we also tell you the key areas that you need to work on so that you get to your target quant score. This is tomorrow at 7 a.m. Pacific, which is 24 hours from now. And then next week, we have a free webinar on how to ace GMAT's intense correction by focusing on meaning and logic, probably our most popular webinar, again, 7 a.m. Pacific, a week from now. With that, I have about 100 students in this webinar, and I want to make sure that we do justice to this group. So we kind of take a pulse of this group to understand, hey, when do you plan to take the test? And then the next question that I have is what is your target GMAT score? Let's get those responses in there. And while you put in your responses, I'll finish my espresso. Okay, the next question is, what is your target GMAT score? Let's get a few more responses. I have 102 students in the webinar right now, and let's get the response to our last question, which is, what is your current GMAT score? And here's the poll question over here. Now, with regards to when people have their GMAT, we have really fairly uniform group. We have the biggest group, which is about 28%. So if you have 5 answer choices or 5 options, and 28% is the biggest group, I'd call it fairly evenly divided. The smallest group is about 10%, the largest about 30%. So, but essentially a good chunk of you taking the test in about 46 to 75 days. Really good time if you're applying for either round 3 or if you're applying next year. It's probably the best time to take the test, sometime between the January, February, March timeframe. It allows you to A, be eligible for round 3, but B, if you plan to apply in round 1 next year, get the best deals on admission consultants. Definitely recommend doing that. You'd save so much money on this, and your chances of admissions would be so much higher. With regards to the target GMAT score, 42% of you are saying the 730 to 750 group, 22% 760. Really happy to hear those high scores. We're going to talk about why those high scores are important. But we also have about 20%, 21% who are in that 600 to 700 bracket. And then with regards to the current GMAT score, again, the biggest group is those who don't know their scores as of yet. Sandeep, you can probably provide them a link to our mock test so that they can get a baseline. But essentially, other than that, fairly evenly divided. The biggest group is about 15%. That's the 400 to 500 group, and the 510 to 550. And then from there on, it does taper off as expected. You won't be in this webinar if you are at a 740 already. Okay, with that, let's go right into the webinar pane. As we go there, you're going to see a few things. First of all, the screen will have changed for you. The second thing is, you're going to see a presentation board which says how do you score 95th percentile or better on the GMAT. And then the third thing that you're going to really see is a Q&A pod or a question and answer pod, which is below the presentation pod. So and that should already be seeing all of that. Okay, here's my video. So let's start with why should you aim for that score of 730 or higher, and why is that score important today? Okay, there are three reasons for the same. The first reason is top B schools now require a score of 730 or higher. Especially if you are an international student, if you are from a profile that's a highly competitive profile, you need that score of 730 or higher. There's so many case studies that are there where people have a 710 score, they apply to a school, they get waitlisted, the school tells them, hey, you've got to get a better score, and they improve their score, they reapply again within the same round. Actually, they don't even reapply, they resubmit the score, and they get admits, not only admits but also scholarships. The other piece which is there is, which I think for me is a big reason for you to go for a high GMAT score, is these schools give out upwards of $300 million worth of scholarship every year, and more than half of those scholarships, that scholarship money goes to people who get to that score of 730 or higher. And then the last piece is the difference in total earnings between those who get into the top 20 schools and those who get into schools ranked 30 or higher. That delta is the highest it has ever been. And I'm going to elaborate more on these points. But again, scoring high on the GMAT is difficult. And you're going to need those strands of motivation to continue to work, especially if you continue to study, especially if you're working full time. And I think if you were to look at three reasons why you should aim for that 730 score, these are the three reasons which are there. Essentially, if you're aiming for that 700, get to that 730 or higher. Those 30 points could be worth $500,000 worth or more. This is a conservative estimate. The first piece is top schools now require high GMAT scores. And when I say now require, this wasn't the case earlier. I mean, think about median scores at top business schools, and you look at the last 5-year trend. What you're going to find is most of the top schools now have that median score going towards that 730-ish range overall. Now, another thing that you would notice is Harvard and Stanford are not here, because why? In the year 2014, these schools already had high median scores. PhD programs workgroup already high median scores. I mean, you want to apply for a PhD, get a 740. Don't go for a score lower than that. Now, between the years 2014 to 2018, for the 23 out of the top 25 schools, the median GMAT scores over there went up. At schools such as, MIT Sloan or Columbia, and let's see if I can get my annotation to work here. Yeah, it is working. So at schools such as MIT Sloan or Columbia, 80% of the incoming class had a score of 700 or higher. So what these guys are saying is, hey, if you have a score less than 700, don't even bother applying. And again, this is despite the fact. So between the years 2014 to 2018, there's been a 15% decline in the overall GMAT test taking population. Despite that, the median scores have gone up. Just to show, just the importance of GMAT, how it has increased for these schools. And there's a quote from Mark Eithor, who's managing editor at Poets and Quants. He says the bottom line remains that only the best of the best have a shot at getting into any of these schools. And again, this trend isn't limited to top 25. If you look at schools in that 26 to 30 range, you're going to find a very, very similar trend. Again, it's not 730, but the median GMAT scores have been going up over there as well. Okay. So this is some statistical data, overall stats. We get about 10,000 students every year. So we get a lot of anecdotal data as well. And again, here are some examples. So for Nishant, for example, he had a score of 690. He applied to a bunch of these schools. He was rejected by Tuck, Penn State, Broad, and Rotman. So other than Tuck, the other schools are not top schools, yet they rejected him. He got a score of 740. He got a full fellowship from Ohio Fisher, which is, in my opinion, ranked higher than Penn State and Broad. and he received an admit from Columbia. He's currently studying at Columbia. Okay, why did Tuck and Smeal reject him? Because they said, we like your candidacy. Your GMAT score is not what's up to what we think where it should be. Okay, Pravi applied to a ton of schools with a score of 680, did not receive a single interview invite. At the end of round two, improved her GMAT score to 740, sent that GMAT score within hours, and again within hours of sending that improved GMAT score, she received 3 interview invites. I mean, you can call it a coincidence. One school I could think of a coincidence, but 3 schools, I think there's definitely something going on there. She was admitted to, Georgetown and UCLA with scholarships, as well as to Kellogg. She's currently graduating from Kellogg, or she just graduated from Kellogg. Krishnakant, again, very similar story. He was rejected by a bunch of schools at a 680 in round two. Then he improved his GMAT score in round three. He got 4 full fellowships. He's including the ones from schools that you see over here. He is currently studying at Georgia Tech. Again, round three, 4 full fellowships. So people talk about admissions in round three. There are scholarships in round three. Okay. So again, takeaway, your GMAT score is way more important than it has ever been, and it will continue to be more important going forward. The second reason, which is I think the most immediate reason, how are you looking to fund your MBA? I think let's kind of get that poll over here. How do you plan to fund your MBA? Let's get a few more responses. I have about 132 students in the webinar. The question is, how do you plan to fund your MBA? But half of you plan to take a loan. About 42% of you are relying on scholarships, and then about 6%, 7% of you are aiming to pay for it yourself, and then we have a few company sponsors. This is good data. That's there. So that's really good to know. So one thing which is there, so just as this is coming from someone who's not paid a single dime for his business school education. I had a full fellowship, multiple full fellowships, by the way. B schools in the US and in Europe give out a record amount of scholarship money. US a lot more than Europe and Canada, but still substantial money is there in Europe and Canada as well. In the US, B schools give out about $350 million worth of merit-based scholarships. Now, based on our estimates, and again, where do these estimates come from? From e-GMAT, and we get about 10,000 e-GMAT over here. But 55% of this amount goes to 6,000 students who score 740 or higher. Now, remember, about 200,000 students who take the GMAT every year. 6,000 of them get 55% of the scholarship money. That's our estimate. But 80% of that money, which is about 280 million or so, is distributed to students who get to a score of 710 or higher. There's a lot of money to be had. So what does this mean? If you get to a score of 740 or higher, the estimated average scholarship amount that you're likely to receive is about $40,000. And then what are the factors that decide scholarship? There are 2 factors. One is your GMAT score. The second is how much they like you during that interview, which, by the way, you get to the interview if you have a good GMAT score. And again, anecdotal data over here. Mansi, one of our students, scored a 770. She got multiple admits. She's currently studying at Harvard in her second year. She got about $90,000 worth of scholarship from Harvard. Victor Makula scored a 770. Got a full ride from Ross and Keenan Flagler. You can watch his video interview over here. Again, $142,000 worth of scholarships. And Kong Bui, an amazing story, scored a 760. He not only got a full ride from Ohio Fisher, but he also is getting paid to study there. He was getting paid $1,700 a month of stipend, just as living expenses. So you're not only just getting that full ride, but you're also getting paid so that you don't have to pay a dime out of your pocket. Again, you can watch his interview on our YouTube channel. Nishant, we talked about, he got a full fellowship from Ohio Fisher. Pravi, also we talked about that, and Krishnakant. I mean, these data points, we talked about them earlier as well. And here is one fairly recent data point, which is just from a couple of weeks back. Ayush got a 710. He applied to Ross. He thought he had an excellent interview over there. He was waitlisted by them. He reached out to those guys, and they said, "Hey guys, what happened? I had a 710." He got the feedback saying, "You need to get a higher GMAT score." He prepared again, got a 750. He didn't even have to apply again. He just resubmitted the 750 score. So the same school that waitlisted him, Ross, offered him scholarship, not just an admission but scholarship, and so did Columbia. He's currently studying at Columbia. So again, just to really say, same application, not even a resubmission, and a high GMAT score. And this is the quote from John Fuller, who's the former admissions director at Ross. He said, "Someone with a 770 GMAT is much more likely to get a financial award than someone with a 670. Why? Because the business school wants to buy that high GMAT score." And we've seen this happen again and again. The third reason, from a financial standpoint, probably the most compelling reason, is the delta in total earnings. Let's kind of see how many of you follow this. Let me just pull it an open-ended question. Which school, and this was recently announced, has the highest median salary for their graduates? And this is a data point that was recently announced a week back or so. Okay. Okay, in the question, I got one correct answer so far. Or actually two. I think I 3, 2, and 1. You'd be surprised. You'd think it would be Harvard or Stanford. The answer is Columbia Business School. It's I think two of you said Columbia. Yes, I mean Harvard, Stanford, they're close to it, but Columbia has been the highest. Okay, and so the reason why this is important is because the delta between the starting salaries at top B schools, and they have been record high for the last 3 years, and they've been increasing at about 7 to 8% every year. That delta between the starting salaries of top schools and schools ranked 30 or higher, that has been the highest it has ever been. Okay, so what does that mean? So in terms of the median base salary, if you compare two schools, and I compare Babson and MIT, the reason why I compare them is because of a few reasons. One, they're close to one another. They're both 20 miles away. So if you're graduating from Babson versus if you're graduating from MIT, you get access to the same employment opportunities. The second reason, they're not in New York or in San Francisco or Bay Area, where salaries are high, but living expenses are also very high. Um, so so um, so that's something which is there. So if you compare these two schools, median starting salaries, the delta is about 40 grand. If you add the bonus, the delta comes to about 60 grand or so. But even if you look at that say that, hey, I'm going to keep the delta at about 45 grand per year, and if you really just say if that, even if that delta remains constant across those 10 years, which is a conservative estimate, that's about 450K. Okay, so essentially three reasons um, to really get that high GMAT score. Okay, Jatin says, and this is where you analyze. This is a really interesting data point. Jatin says $500,000 over 10 years is 5,000 per year, or it's about 50,000 per year. Jatin, that's the math which is wrong. Now 50,000 per year is $4,200 per month, which I think is pretty good. Yes. So yes, if you were to say, hey, I'm going to spend a month preparing for the GMAT, get those extra 50 points, and I'm going to make $4,200 per year per month incremental for the next 10 years, I think that's a really good deal. That's a rent in the US on $1 million house, by the way. So working for a month, you get $1 million. Okay, so now that you know that GMAT's really important, um, let's kind of look at what else does it take to ace the GMAT. And one thing that I want you to take away from this is acing the GMAT is about building ability. Okay. To understand this, let me ask this question again, very open-ended, and I want you guys to be honest. How do you think when you are in this session today, you're going to ace the GMAT? I mean, what are the three things that you're going to do? Just write down three things, simple stuff that you're going to do that you think will help you ace the GMAT. Just whatever you've thought about. Okay, I'm going to remove broadcast results. I have 10 responses so far. Let's get more. "28 responses, 30 responses." Yes. Let's get a few more. Let's get to 50. 40 responses. 47. 49. 50. So you can read this over here, and I want you to stop typing right now and read this, and take about 30 seconds to read this, and then tell me what's the most common word that you see over here. What's the most common word? So don't tell me I'm going to put in a separate poll. I want you to take 30 seconds to read this, because we have about 135 students right now. What you have over here is what I call as how the group thinks about acing the GMAT. Okay. Now think, I'm going to give you another 5 seconds, and let me just put in another poll over here so that here is another poll. Now tell me what was the most common word that you saw in those responses. Actually, the most common word that I saw was practice. Practice, practice. The second most common word which was there was essentially skill, or no, what was the word? Sorry, uh, techniques. Okay, there were a few good things, which a few of you talked about plans, a few of you talked about building competency. I love to hear those words. But when I see the word practice, 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 I will tell you, people who fail do way more practice than people who succeed. And we've written an article, we've researched about 600 students, 300 who succeeded, 300 who failed. What we found was that people who succeeded solved half the questions that the people who failed. In fact, people who failed spent a lot more effort preparing for the GMAT, solved way more questions overall. And Sandeep, if you could share the link to what causes success on the GMAT so that they have that. But again, if you think practice is going to get there, it will not. I think many of you who've been preparing for some time and are still in this webinar know that already, because you've been practicing for some time. So one thing that I want you to take away, and we're going to prove this to you, is acing the GMAT is about building ability. And let's kind of understand that very term over here. And if you have ability, you're going to feel that inside, that you have that ability, improved ability right now. Stuff such as, focusing on timing, which was a very popular response as well. Focusing on how are you going to solve question in the first 10 minutes, first 15 minutes, first, 30 minutes or so. Choosing which ones to skip and so on and so forth. These are a distant second. And I say a distant second. Now, if I were to really just emphasize on how much of a distant second it is, 80% of your score would be dependent on your ability, probably the last 20% on this. The problem really is people focus on that 20% because it seems easy to really fix that. They don't focus on this 80%. If you don't get that 80%, that 20% won't matter. Okay. So just to really tell you accuracy versus ability over here, how different it is. Um, what is accuracy? When you take a quiz, you get answer 8 out of 10 questions correctly. You said my accuracy is 80%. Ability is your comparative performance. And the difference over here is you can have an accuracy of 80%, your ability would still be about 50 percentile. Why? Because if you take a quiz and half the people who take the quiz answer 8 out of 10 questions correctly, you have 50 percentile ability. That's how ability works. And to demonstrate this point, or rather the difference between accuracy and ability, I'm going to simulate an adaptive test. Why? Because the GMAT is an adaptive test. What we have over here is on the y-axis the difficulty level of questions. On the x-axis, you have question numbers. So the higher you go, uh, the higher, the more difficult the question becomes. And Bruegel says, hey, is official guide enough to get ability? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The official guide is a practice platform, not an ability building platform. You can ask the folks at GMAT, they'll tell you the same thing. So if you don't want to believe me. But yeah, it's a practice platform. It's not an ability building platform. So let's kind of look at this. We're going to simulate two students here, student A and student B, or case 1 and case 2 as we call them over here. They're going to start with the first question. The first question is always around that median difficulty level. And again, we're simplifying things to tell you the principle on how a computer adaptive test works. The real test is slightly more sophisticated, but if you understand this, it's good enough for you to understand how a computer adaptive test works. So case 1, student 1 gets the first question. Median difficulty level gets that right, gets the second question, which is of a higher difficulty level. Why do we say it's of a higher difficulty level? Why? Because as you go from question 1 to question 2, we are moving higher on the y-axis. He gets that right. Gets the third question, even higher difficulty level, gets that wrong. Gets the fourth question, which is at a difficulty level between question number 3 and question number 2. And how do you ascertain that? Draw horizontal lines from here. You're going to find the fourth question is between these two difficulty levels. Sorry about that. Let's remove these horizontal lines. Gets that right. Gets the fifth question wrong as well. Case 2 or student 2 gets the first question, same median difficulty level question, gets that wrong. Gets the second question, lower difficulty, gets that right. Third question, slightly higher difficulty level, gets that wrong. Fourth question, slightly lower difficulty level, gets that right. And gets the fifth question right as well. Now, at the end of question number 5, if I were to end this test, so if I were to really just block this test, who do you think would be doing better? Is it student 1 or case 1 or case 2? It's case 1. Why is it? Why does the test consider case 1 or student 1 to be better? Okay, let's get a few more responses. Why is student 1 better? All right, I'm getting some really good responses here. So the very simple reason is that he answered more difficult questions. The reason why student 1 is better is because student 1 got 5 questions. Each of those 5 questions were either at the average difficulty level or above the average difficulty level. Student 2 actually didn't even get difficult questions to solve. He got one question which was at the average difficulty level. Every other question that student 2 received was below the average difficulty level. Okay. Both of them actually had identical accuracy. Both of them solved 3 out of 5 questions correct. Their accuracy was 60%, but their abilities were very different. Why? Because the weighted score was a lot different. So a difficult question, for example, has 3 times as many points as an easy question. Okay. So what is ability? Ability is an indication that you can solve difficult questions correctly. Okay. So when it comes to acing the GMAT, you have 2 challenges that you need to master. One is you need to make sure that you get difficult questions served to you. Why? Because it's a computer adaptive test. It's not going to serve difficult questions if it doesn't think you can solve them. Second, is to answer those difficult questions correctly. Okay. Now, some of you are saying he answered the initial questions correctly, and that's why. That is an observation. That is not a causality. Just to really tell you the difference between that, I can show you ESRs where people have made mistakes on the questions early on, and they've still gotten a very high score. And the reason for that is because the questions on which they made mistakes, they were difficult questions. Now, does that happen very often? No, not very often that you make mistakes early. But what matters is 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 that you make mistakes on questions that are difficult, not on easy. You make mistakes on easy questions, you get penalized. So GMAT's a test of your ability. Now, what you have over here is verbal attempt of the old GMAT prep software. When I say the old GMAT prep software, we're talking about pre-May of 2018 era, where on the verbal section you had 41 questions, on the quant section you had 36, so it was longer. But the beauty of that GMAT prep software was it gave us a ton of analytics, and this is something that it allowed us to do, which is you have the accuracy plots of two students over here, and what you have over here with these accuracy plots is essentially the rectangles are the positions where the students made mistakes. Now, what you see over here as a difference between these two students is that student 2 made 2 additional mistakes over here. Question number 1 and question number 2 were the 2 additional mistakes. But if you compare between question number 11 and question number 41, you're going to find that they're very, very similar. There's nothing to take away between these two students. Now, if you focus just on accuracy, you would infer, hey, their score should be fairly similar. It's just 2 mistakes early on. But that's not the case. Student 2, or the guy on the right hand side, got a verbal score of 32. Student 1 got a verbal score of 43. Now, what does a verbal score of 43 mean? A verbal score of 43 means that this guy got a 97th percentile rank, whereas student 2 got a 65th percentile rank. How many of you are thinking, man, 2 mistakes and the delta of about 64,000 students? GMAT's a very harsh test. How many of you are thinking that way? How many of you are thinking that way? The GMAT is a really harsh test. You can put your answers in the Q&A pod, in the open-ended pod over there. Not in the Q&A pod at the bottom, but the pod on the right-hand side. There's a lot of people who think that. Now, and there are a few people who say, don't think so, and I love those guys, that it's more about your ability. Yes. But one thing that people who think that they fail to account for is that, hey, I can get a 90. I mean, they fail to look at this guy over here who's got this 97th percentile and say, this guy made 9 mistakes out of 41 questions. He was still able to get to that 97th percentile. I mean, how amazing that test is. I can answer almost a quarter of the questions incorrectly, yet be among the top 3 percentile of students. Isn't that amazing? You can make that many mistakes and yet be among the top 3 percentile. So the thing that I'm trying to really tell you is, when you look at a view of an attempt from an accuracy standpoint, you might infer incorrectly that GMAT is a very harsh test. But that's not how the GMAT evaluates you. How the GMAT evaluates you is by looking at your abilities. These are their ability scores. This is the ability view of these students. Okay. Now, when you look at these students from a lens of ability, do these students look different? Do they look very different? And just to really make that point, the V43 guy is at 87th percentile ability in reading comprehension, whereas the V32 guy is at 59th percentile ability. Similarly, on critical reasoning, you can see the delta in ability is 95th versus 66th. And that's what the GMAT cares about, not the number of mistakes. And that's the beauty of this test. If you have the ability, you can make mistakes and still get a 95th percentile on verbal. If you get a 95th percentile on verbal and an 85th percentile on quant, you can get a 760, by the way, which is 99th percentile overall. So it is truly a test of ability. It's a test where you can make mistakes as long as you can prove to the test that you can answer difficult questions. Now, here is the other takeaway that I want you to have from it. And again, I'm tilting my monitor, so I'm gonna just pause my video over here so that you don't have to take a look at the ceiling. But when you're studying for the GMAT, and let's just make this over here. When you're studying for the GMAT, tell yourself that I am aiming for that high ability in critical reasoning. Okay, what does this mean that you're aiming for that 95th percentile ability in critical reasoning? What it means is, when you're studying critical reasoning, you will have those distractions that, hey, let me go and study something else. Let me go watch a video. Let me essentially come back to this because I can't understand this particular topic. And let me come back to this later. You have to resist those temptations. Why? Because you have to tell yourself, I am aiming for that 95th percentile. You will not get that 95th percentile if you give in to those temptations. There's a reason why only 5 percentile of students get that 95th percentile. That's why it's 95th percentile, because you've got to resist those temptations. It's not hard from a subject matter standpoint. It's hard from a self-discipline standpoint. So what abilities, and again, do these temptations happen to you? I mean, have you done that? You're saying you've been studying for one thing and you say, let me come back to this later, right? Yeah, you've got to resist those people. And on our YouTube channel, you'll see about 100 unedited debriefs. And one commonality that you're going to find in those debriefs, other than the fact that they're all e-GMAT students, is that these guys overcame these anxieties. These guys actually built not just a study plan, but a study habit, which is to really say, I'm going to study from 5 to 7 in the morning, or I'm going to study from 8 to 10 in the evening. They created those study slots. They said, I'm not going to be disturbed during that time. I'm not going to watch YouTube. Some of them installed even apps which prevented them from going to certain websites. And then it's not whether you can do that yourself or whether you need some external help. The key thing that is there is that you do it regardless of what tools you use with regards to helping yourself do that. Okay, so what abilities does the GMAT measure? And so, your score out of 800 is composed of these quant and verbal scores. These quant scores are then split between arithmetic and algebra geometry. On the verbal side, you have 3 subsectional abilities. So overall, your GMAT score is composed of 5 different abilities. And essentially what it means is each of these abilities is independent. So how much you get in SC has very little to do with how much you get in RC or in CR or in arithmetic or in algebra. Okay. And so when the test combines these abilities to calculate your overall quant and verbal score. So when you think about building that study plan, you have to first answer this question: what abilities am I going to aim for in these subsections? Now, you may not get to those precise abilities, but if you have an aim, you will build a study plan that allows you to allocate time to get into those abilities, and that is much more informed decision making and planning. Utkarsh says, how is that more at 60%? It's not 60%, it's a scaled score. It's an ability score out of 60. So on the verbal side, arguably there are 60 ability levels. On the quant side, arguably there are 60 ability levels. Right now, the GMAT is utilizing ability scores between 11 and 51. They're looking at about 40 ability levels. They have reserved about 20 ability levels for future expansion. So there are 40 ability levels that are in practice in quant, 40 ability levels that are in practice in verbal. And that's why the score out of 60. Good question, Utkarsh. So it's not 60%, it's a level of ability. That's why that's out of 60. Each of those scores out of 60 has a certain percentile score, which are, the true ability levels. So acing the GMAT is about building ability, and all of these things, worry about them once you have ability. If you don't have ability, don't even bother about them, frankly. Here's another example of a student who made a ton of mistakes yet was able to get to a V40. A V40 is 91st percentile. Okay, he improved from a verbal score of 17 to a verbal score of 40. Now you can see his ability scores over here, but the thing which you see over, and you can download his ESR as well from the link below, and I'm going to share the PDF. But the key thing over here is, as you look at his attempt summary, what you can see is how, he made a ton of mistakes in block 3, he made a ton of mistakes in block 4, but he proved that he could solve medium questions, he could solve difficult questions to the test, and because he could prove that, the test, even though when the test threw more and more difficult questions at him, and he made mistakes, but because he made mistakes on those difficult questions, he was still able to get a 91st percentile on GMAT verbal. This is despite making 12 mistakes. Okay, so now that we know acing the GMAT is about building ability, let's see how we can help each one of you to create a personalized study plan. So what does a study plan do? I asked this question yesterday. I had a mini study plan webinar yesterday. So what does a study plan do? Can you tell me? Okay, be more efficient, routine, discipline. Channelizes the strategy, okay, organize. Okay, Ashita has a great question while you guys are putting your answers, and she says, since a lot of us will be attempting the exam in 15 days, should we really be taking a look at the study plan? It's a great question. It's a question that a lot of us get. One thing, and thank you, Ashita, for asking that question. One thing that I will tell you is that that when you are short on time, when you are struggling with time, the plan becomes way more important than when you have more than ample time. Why? Because when you have 15 days, you've got to decide a few things. One is, how are you going to get to that score that you want to get to? The second is, to get to that score, what all do you need to do in that order of priority? And then the third is, how much time do you need to spend to achieve that? And then, out of the given time, how would you get that time? The other beauty of this is, if you need to make time, if that study plan tells you that you need to make time, and then if you have 15 days, you can actually make that time. So study plan for you, Ashita, is way more important than most of the people over here. Okay. Now, a lot of you are saying a study plan gives you accountability, a study plan gives you routine, a study plan keeps you more organized. And yes, all of that is true, but the primary purpose of a study plan, as someone says, is channelizes your energy, which is really important. A study plan answers 3 questions. One is, how will I reach my target GMAT score? And that's a very specific answer that you're looking for. This not just, I'm going to improve on core, I'm going to improve on verbal. It has to be a very numerical answer to how will I reach my target GMAT score. The second is, how much time do I need to put in? And again, it may seem like it's very similar to number 1, but it is not. And I'm going to explain that with a case study. And the third is, where do I need to put in that time? Okay, that's really important, because you may have a path to your target GMAT score. You may have a decent estimate of the amount of time, but if you don't put that time in the right areas, you will not get there. I guarantee that to you. So each of these 3 questions is important. And then comes the discipline part, which is, when am I going to study another pieces. Those are, in my opinion, your study habits piece. That's not what a study plan does. For example, I love to study in the morning. I don't like studying in the night. Some of you may like studying in the night. Payal, for example, loves to study. Who's my co-founder? She loves to work at night. She doesn't like working in the morning as much. But so that's individualistic. But for each one of you, these three questions are important. Okay, so let's kind of look at this over here. We're going to take a case study of two students. Both of them go from 600 to 740, and we will call them Abby and Chase. And you see Abby on the left hand side over here, Chase on the right hand side over here, and so Abby is someone who's starting at a Q42 and a V31. She's someone who has a more balanced quant and verbal score. And then Chase is someone who's stronger in quant but weaker in verbal. Let's kind of, since we have so many of you over here, let's see how many of you associate with Abby and how many of you associate with Chase. I'm going to put in a poll question. Let's just do that. Let's open this question over here. Who do you associate with? Is it Abby or Chase? Starting scores: Q42 V31 is Abby, Q49 V23 is Chase. Okay, who do you associate with? Let's get at least 65 responses. Is it Abby or Chase? I should have put neither as well, maybe someone. But essentially, all right, 70 responses, broadcast results, fairly even group over here. That is great. Okay. So now remember, when you're starting, we talked about GMATs, about 5 abilities. You've got to get those 5 abilities. So to make things simple, we said we're going to put Abby at about 42th percentile in arithmetic and algebra, and Chase to be at about 72nd percentile in quant. And then in SCCR and RC, we're going to put Abby at around 60th percentile, and we're going to put Chase at around 35th percentile or so. Okay, just to keep things simple, because there's so many numbers out there. Okay, so now the question for you: do you think Abby and Chase need to achieve the same quant and verbal scores to get to 740? Remember, both of them are at 600. Both of them want to get to that 740 score. Do you think they need to put in the same amount of time on quant and verbal? And do they need to study the same content to get there? No. No, the answer to each one of these questions is no, despite the fact that they have the same starting score, same ending score. Okay, and so how do you determine how much time you need? We built an AI-driven tool. We'd love to help you out, love to help each one of you out to build your personalized study plan. You can go to gmatplanner.com and schedule a session. But let's kind of see how they would go through this. And these are outputs or screenshots from GMAT Planner. What you see over here is, again, Abby's current score and Abby's recommended score. So for Abby, what GMAT Planner recommends is that Abby scores a Q48 and a V32. And these are the target abilities on quant. These are the target abilities on the verbal side of things. Okay. Now, where does Abby spend her time? She spends about 6 to 6.5 weeks on verbal. You can really see these are her starting abilities over here in quant and verbal, and then in target abilities in quant and verbal, and these are the estimated amount of times, about 6 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks each on verbal, and then about 2.5 weeks on quant. Now, this may seem counterintuitive, but the key thing about this plan is Abby's strategy is verbal driven. 65% of her GMAT score is accounted for by her performance on verbal. So naturally, she's going to spend more time on verbal. And on quant, that's about 35%. So less time on quant. Okay. Chase, very similar profile. He's going to aim for a Q50, V40, and you can see the target scores. Okay. Now, where Chase spends time or how much time Chase spends is also very different. He's not going to spend as much time on quant. Why? Because it's already there. He is going to spend upwards of 9 weeks or close to 9 weeks on GMAT verbal. Okay, why? Because he needs a massive improvement over there. Now, here's the key thing. You may say, hey, V40, V42 seem very similar, Q50, Q48 seem very similar, but they are not similar. But that's not the key thing. And this is something which is really important. A lot of people fail to account for this. The key thing is how much time are they spending on the respective sections. Chase is spending 9 weeks on verbal and 1.5 weeks on quant. Abby is spending 6 weeks on verbal and 3 weeks on quant. Now imagine if you are Abby, and there are lots of Abbies here. If you're Abby and you're saying, hey, I'm at 42nd percentile in quant, I have to achieve 64th percentile. And instead of 3 weeks that we are estimating, you only get 1.5 weeks. What would happen to you? If you say, I'm Abby, in 1.5 weeks, I've got to get to 65th percentile or so, what would happen? If you are Abby, you would start to panic, right? You're going to say, hey man, I've got to achieve that. And then you're going to rush through your study material. You're not going to focus on building that ability that we talked about. Similarly, if you were Chase and you say, hey, I'm starting at the 35th percentile, okay, and you've got to get to that 90th percentile, and you only have 6 weeks for all of verbal, not just intense correction, but all of verbal. The same thing is going to happen to you if you are Chase, right? So even though same starting score, same ending score, getting those right estimates in terms of number of hours, that's really, really important. Why? Because it allows you to learn things properly. It allows you to build that ability. But that's not the biggest difference. The biggest difference is what do they study? Where do they spend these 9 weeks or 6 weeks? Okay. And to do that, let's understand how we build ability as we learn content. So we call this stages of learning. Okay. In any subsection, whether it's arithmetic, whether it's algebra, whether it's critical reasoning, whether it's reading comprehension or sentence correction, there are certain concepts that you need to learn. If you just learn the concepts, you can answer easy questions. Okay. And so you build what I call as a 25th to 30th percentile ability. As you learn how to apply those concepts on slightly more complex questions, which I call as learning application, you get to that 50th percentile ability. As you get better at applying, you get to that 70th percentile ability, and then as you use analytics, you refine to perfection. That's when you get to that 90th percentile ability. Okay, so depending on where you are, you've got to really what you study varies. Now, some of you were asking early on, can I get to that 90th percentile ability by just solving the OG? The answer to, and I said no. The reason is where OG comes in is after that 50th percentile ability and until that 70th percentile ability. That's where the official guide is useful. If you don't have the methods, you start solving the official guide, you're not going to find it to be very useful. Once you hit that 70th percentile, to get to that 90th percentile, you need much better solutions, you need much better analytics, you need what we call a strategic review. That's something that Payal would demonstrate in about 10 minutes or so. Okay, so this is where your OG is useful. Okay. So where does Abby spend her time? Now remember, you have Abby's starting percentiles over here. She is doing on her starting percentiles in SCCR and RC is around that 60th percentile. So will she be learning concepts? Will she be learning concepts? No, she's not going to be learning concepts. She already knows most of the concepts. That's what her ability indicates. So she's going to really focus on mastering application, refining to perfection, and maintaining that. Okay. Ishan has a really great question, and Ishan, I'm going to respond to that. Give me 5 minutes. A really good question. I'm glad you asked. Now, on the quant side of things, her starting scores are much lower, and she's not aiming for that 90th percentile. So she's going to focus a ton of her time on learning concepts and mastering applications. But she's not going to spend a ton of time on this over here. So Ishan says, GMAT's a learning-based test. How can you determine my time learning a particular subsection? Learning a particular subsection is going to take. Ishan, that's a great question, and it's a really good point over there. So all of these times are estimates, and these are really good estimates. Now, how do we figure those estimates out? When you have 40,000 students, and when you monitor 500 data points against every student, you get really good at making those estimates. Now, does this mean these are foolproof? No, these are not. Does this mean these are infallible? No. If we give you an estimate that you're going to study sentence correction in 40 hours because your starting ability is about 30th percentile, and during those 40 hours, if you're actually not focused, you're going to really not get to that 80th or 90th percentile ability. However, during those 40 hours, we'll be measuring your performance at least 100 times. We will be giving you feedback about every 30 minutes or so. So we will tell you you're not studying the right way. That's what our platform is designed to do. It gives you 5 times as much feedback as a private tutor would do. So these are good estimates based on the experience of 40,000+ students. But it's not just a blanket estimate. With every learning entity in the e-GMAT platform, you get feedback whether you're learning properly or not. And if you're not learning properly, of course, you've got to revise that. Does that answer your question, Ishan? Good question. Now, let's come back to Abby and Chase. Chase, remember, was starting at a much lower point on verbal. So he's going to spend a ton of time on learning concepts and application and mastering application, and he then will spend some time to refine to perfection over here. Now, when you compare Abby and Chase, do you see why Chase needs more time? Can you tell me, when you just compare those graphs that we just talked about, Abby and Chase, why is it that Chase needs more time in verbal? Why does Chase need more time in verbal? Low percentile. And what does that low percentile translate to? It translates to the fact that Chase needs to spend time on this step, learning concepts and application, right? If you compare Abby and Chase, let's go back. How much time is Abby spending on learning concepts and application? Not a whole lot. But when it comes to Chase, he does need to spend that time, and that's where those 3 additional weeks are required. And the reason, the takeaway for a lot of you over here is that a lot of you think, hey man, I'm starting at a low percentile, I can't get to that 730, 740 score. No, that's not true. What's true is that you require more time. Why? Because you need to travel a longer journey. As long as you're traveling that journey properly in a methodical fashion, which means you focus on building that foundation, then focus on learning how to apply the methods, then focus on mastering those methods, and then focus on refining to perfection, you will get there. But you've got to stay focused that entire time. Okay. Chase is not going to spend time learning concepts in quant, right? Or mastering application. Why? Because he's already at 72nd percentile, but he's going to spend time on refining to perfection. And this is really important. Why? Because it's not just about allocating the time, it's also about making that decision as to where you spend that time. And the key takeaway over here is, even though Chase and Abby are both aiming for that 740 score, their path and the time required and what components, what are they going to focus on while studying, that's very different. Okay, so how do you build ability? When you think about that, and I'm going to now invite Payal, is what we've learned so far is let's just summarize. You need to get those high GMAT scores if you want to get to a top B school and get a scholarship. To ace the GMAT, you need to build ability. Your personalized study plan tells you how do you go about building ability. It ensures that you study the right thing. It defines that stage of learning and study the right thing. And then there are these 4 stages of learning where you learn concepts, learn application, you master application, and you refine to perfection. And then there's that 1 stage of retention, which is maintaining performance. If you need help with that, if you're an e-GMAT student, we have specific quizzes to maintain performance that you can take in Scholaranium. We can help you with that as well. Okay, once again, the stages of learning. Now, question for you. In any subsection, how many of you are stuck at that 60th percentile? Let me put in a yes, no poll over here. Select yes if you feel you're stuck at that 60th percentile or even lower. A good chunk of you are. So let's see, why is it that people don't improve beyond that 60th percentile? Payal, I'd love to invite you to come over and move on from this part.
Welcome everyone to this webinar here. Let's just make sure everyone can hear me clearly. Can you all hear me clearly? Yes, no? All right. Perfect. So let's talk about why is it that people don't improve beyond the 60th percentile in sentence correction. Okay. Now, we're going to compare these people. So essentially, both the segments have spent similar amount of time. Their starting ability is the same. Their overall capability is the same, as Rajat has already alluded to. Now we're going to talk about why is it that there are some people who are not able to get to 90th percentile. Essentially, getting to 90th percentile requires that level of perfection. Okay. Now, in terms of concepts that a sentence correction test you want, there are 8 major types of concepts that all of us are very well aware of. Subject, verb, verbs, pronouns, modifiers, parallelism, comparison, right? So both the students learn the concepts about in about the similar manner, right? There is slight difference and I'm going to talk about that. So the 60th percentile student learns these concepts from a very conceptual standpoint. A 60th percentile student typically ends up applying splits method as a primary technique. He or she uses meaning as a secondary method. By that, and I'm going to explain to you, and I'm going to explain that to you when I come to my example question. Okay. So a 60th percentile, a person who's stuck at 60th percentile definitely doesn't rely on meaning-based method as his primary method. He relies on the splits technique. The number of feedback points that a typical 60th percentile student ends up getting based on the course that they use is about 7 to 10 feedback points. And I'll compare that to what a 90th percentile student gets and utilizes. And the time spent between learning and practice is actually just 30% learning and 70% practice. And that's because a typical student who gets to a 60th percentile ends up practicing a number of questions, hundreds of thousands of questions, and again that's why he ends up spending a lot of time in simply practicing. Okay, a 90th percentile student, on the other hand, first learns how to read a sentence. He doesn't even get to the rules, the subject verb or the verbs rule. He first learns how is it that should I be reading the sentence, because he understands that GMAT SC is not about conceptual knowledge. It is about understanding that intended meaning that the author wants to communicate. So that's what a typical 90th percentile student does. He learns the manner in which you need to learn the sentence, read the sentence and understand its meaning, and then he goes on to learning the concepts in the right way. Now, as far as the method goes, from the get-go, a student who gets to that 90th percentile utilizes meaning as the basic method that he needs to use. Meaning is not an error type. Contrast that with a 60th percentile student. A 60th percentile student comes to meaning only if he or she is not able to eliminate answer choices based on the common grammar rules. Okay, he utilizes meaning as one of the error types. On the contrary, a 90th percentile student starts off his or her analysis from meaning and then ends with that. Okay. Now, number of feedback points during learning. A typical 90th percentile student utilizes 80 to 120 feedback points that the e-GMAT system provides him or her with. Okay, and I'm going to talk about that as well. In terms of the time spent between learning and practice, 60% of time is spent in learning. And mind you, it's not just learning the concept, it's learning the application. And because he spends so much time in learning the concepts and application upfront, when he actually needs to practice, he doesn't really need to practice a whole lot number of questions, and I'm going to demonstrate that as well. But right now, what I want you to do is, even if you want to take a screenshot of this right now, just take a screenshot of this, and we're going to be talking about. I'm going to be explaining this difference I'm going to demonstrating this difference to you as I go ahead in this presentation. Okay. Now, really speaking, if you think about it, GMAT tests you on 200 some concepts. I mean, GMAT SC primarily is the most conceptual heavy subsection in the entire GMAT. Now, it tests you on 200 concepts. Now, how do you achieve perfection in the first go if all you get is 7 to 10 feedback points while you're learning? And that is the typical number of feedback points that you end up getting if you're learning from a book or if you're learning from any other competitive online course. Okay, so it is very, very hard to achieve that level of perfection because nobody gets very few people get the concept the first time that they go through it. No, and here there are 200 concepts, so you really need to get feedback on which concepts do I need to review again, which concepts do I need to practice again in order to attain that mastery of concepts. Okay, now the other part is that what feedback do you get today that tells you that you're learning concepts in the right way? As far as I understand how most of you prepare using books or using stuff that's available on the internet or maybe some other online courses. And again, you learn in a linear manner. You continue learning concepts. You don't get that feedback, right? And that is where the problem is. Okay. Now, third point, which again is very, very critical, and I want you guys to think about that really hard. When you're learning concepts in sentence correction, you end up learning all the concepts together and then you start to solve questions. Okay. Now, where are you learning how to apply those concepts? Yes, you know that verb ing modifier works this way. Yes, you may know that subjunctive verb form is such and such, but how do you take that concept and apply it in the context of the GMAT question? You end up doing that towards the end of your preparation, okay? And you're not really learning how to apply these concepts as you are learning those concepts, and that is where the problem lies, okay? So I'm going to come to this slide later on. Actually, let's talk about it. There are 3 stages of learning. The first stage is you learn the concepts, and for that you utilize the e-GMAT learning platform. In this learning platform itself, you get about 75 personalized feedback points. Then you learn the application. You get 23 feedback points here. Then you master your application and your concepts, and you get 30 to 50 feedback points here. And then when you are in the test readiness stage, your stage 3, you have 5 Sigma X mocks that you can take. So again, the e-GMAT technology platform gives you feedback at each and every stage of your learning so that you are learning in the right way, so that you're spending time where you need to spend time. Okay, again, you don't need to go through all the concepts multiple times. You need to be told, okay, what concepts do you really need to achieve, that you really need to review in order to get to your perfection. Okay, now what we're going to do is I'm going to explore the method aspect. I talked about sentence correction question that I want to take up in order to explain to you why are methods so important and what method should you be utilizing in order to solve SC questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first ask you, how many of you, what is the method that you typically use today to solve a SC question? Tell me, what is it? What is the first thing that you do? How much time do you spend in doing that? What's the next thing that you do? How much time do you spend in doing that? And then what's the third thing that you do? Okay, I see splits plus meaning. Read 1 minute, would you just get a feel of whether this is correct or not. Meaning, splits plus subject verb agreement. Read carefully the sentence, identify meaning plus SC methods. Okay, so I see that some of you have written meaning, some of you have written more from conceptual standpoint or splits, elimination after meaning based. Okay, all right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a question, and I want you to utilize whatever method it is that you utilize to solve SC questions, and then solve the question. Okay, and then I'm going to give you a detailed description of how you should have solved the question. Okay, so let me get the poll here, and I typically don't time. I'm not going to be, actually I'll give you about 90 seconds to solve this question. Okay, so there you go, solve the question. Here's the question. Go. All right, it's more than 90 seconds. We're almost getting to about 2-minute mark. Let's get some more responses here. I have about how many responses? 49 responses. 50. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. And here are your responses. So it's almost an equal split between choices C and D. And then B and E have again similar number of votes, almost similar, 5 or 6. All right. So we have quite an interesting poll here. So I'm going to remove this here. Now, how many of you are confident of your responses? How many of you are confident of the response that you've selected? Okay, good. Now, were there any problems that you faced while solving this question? Were you confused about certain stuff? Were you wondering, okay, if I knew this, I would have been able to answer this question, or if I had more time or something? Yeah. Too long sentence, some words are complicated, tempted by intuition, confusing choices. Too long, structure is complicated, takes time to read, understand the meaning, understanding every piece of the sentence, too many words. And this is a very typical sentence correction SC question. It's a very typical question. It's nothing very out of the ordinary. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is Actually, let me ask you this question. Were there any splits in this question that you were able, how many of you tried to utilize the splits methodology? And splits methodology, for those of you who are not aware of it, is that you really try to find the similarities and dissimilarities amongst the answer choices, and then you make the decision as to which kind of pattern is correct. So there are a few of you who were able to find splits. And again, finding splits in a completely underlined sentence is very, very complicated. So definitely, I mean, splits method doesn't work for 700 level questions. If your goal is to get to that 90th percentile ability, this means you need to be adept at solving difficult questions, which means that you need to follow a method that gives you a sure shot way of arriving at the correct answer, and splits is definitely not that method. Okay. Now, if you simply rely on splits without really understanding in detail what the sentence is telling you, then you are going to be stuck here. I mean, you find these similarities here. 4 answer choices utilize but, there is one that doesn't. It utilizes while instead. Then there's just, again, it's very difficult to utilize splits method. So now, again, as I said, to achieve that 90th percentile, you need to utilize a method which consistently gives you the correct answer, and that is the meaning-based method. Now, how would you solve this question using this meaning-based method is what I'm going to talk about. The first and the foremost thing that you need to do is split the sentence into its smaller chunks and understand the meaning of those chunks. Okay, and that is very, very important, and that is precisely what a typical student who gets 90th percentile in SC does. He first learns how to read the sentence to understand its meaning, and that's what I'm going to be demonstrating here. Okay, now the method that we utilize to read the sentence and understand its meaning is called strategic pausing method, and this method is explained to you in detail in Master Comprehension course. Okay, now once we teach you that method using Master Comprehension course, we utilize that same method for all the questions that we solve, regardless of whether those questions are in the application files or practice files or Scholarium questions or our mock questions. So each and every question is solved using the same method. Okay, and that's why it starts to getting, as you're going through the course, it starts to get ingrained in your mind. Okay, now what I do whenever I'm doing strategic pausing is I pause at appropriate points. Okay, the church coined the date February 14th as Valentine's Day. Now I have this with, okay, let me get my pen here. I have this with here, so I just pause here first, right? The church coined the date Feb 14th as Valentine's Day. So who coined the date? Church, Feb 14th as Valentine's Day, with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia. Okay, so what was the motive? So with the ulterior motive, it explains why the church coined the date Feb 14th as Valentine's Day, with an ulterior motive, with certain motive, to quote-unquote Christianize the pagan celebration. Pagan is some other religion. To Christianize the pagan celebration of something, Lupercalia, is claimed by a few experts. But, so I see a comma but, so I pause over here, is claimed by a few experts. Now this is where, how many of you kind of felt there's something not quite right with what I've just read? The church, I was okay till this point. Okay, so how many of you felt this way? I was okay till this point that the church coined this date with an ulterior motive to do such and such is claimed by a few experts. But when I read this, there was something not quite right with it. So yes, so 14 of you were able to identify this, something not quite right. And that is a very, very powerful thing to note. Whenever you are pausing and reading the sentence to understand each and every chunk, you end up spotting certain issues if the sentence is not written in the correct manner. So you're actually doing that error analysis as you are reading to understand the meaning. But when you come to a part that is not written correctly, you need to not stop there. You need to still try to understand it. You need to understand all the chunks of the sentence and not really get bothered by what's not making sense. Okay, so you pause here. Yes, there's something quite off with it. So let's see, the church coined this date with an ulterior motive to Christianize this is claimed by a few experts. So now you think, okay, guess what the author is trying to say is that a few experts claim that the reason why the church coined Feb 14th as Valentine's Day was with the ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration. That they did this because they had this motive to Christianize the pagan celebration. Okay, so you've understood that. Now then you read further, but. So you have but, which means there is a contrast, but it is celebrated on this date. Now what is celebrated on this date? It refers to Valentine's Day, but Valentine's Day is celebrated on this date. And what is this date? This date is Feb 14th. Okay, so look what I'm doing here. What I'm doing is, as I'm reading, I am understanding what refers to what, and I'm not just reading that particular chunk, I'm relating it back to the other parts of the sentence that I've already read. And that is the beauty of reading the sentence to understand its meaning, because while you're doing that, you are understanding the grammatical usages as well. Okay, you're using your knowledge of grammar to read and understand the meaning of the sentence. Okay, but it is celebrated on this date to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial. So now this is another reason that the author is stating of why it is celebrated, why Valentine's Day is celebrated on Feb 14th. It is to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial is the more prevalent belief. Okay, so that's what the author is saying. The author has presented two beliefs. One is of the few experts who are saying that the church did this because with the motive to Christianize the pagan celebration. The other is the more prevalent belief. More prevalent belief is that Valentine's Day is celebrated on this date. It's got nothing to do with the ulterior motive of the church. It's celebrated on this date to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial. Okay. So now I have a complete sense of what the sentence is about. There are two claims about the celebration of Feb 14th as Valentine's Day. Church, claim 1 is that church designated it with a specific motive. Claim 2 is that it's celebrated to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death. Third part is that claim 1 is claimed by a few experts. Claim 2 is the more prevalent belief. Okay. Now, what I'm going to ask you now is, how many of you mark all the points that you were able to extract when you read the sentence on your own? And I'm going to give you the poll here as well. I am actually getting the right poll. And let me change this. Just give me 1 second here. Okay, now tell me, which all points were you able to extract when you read the sentence on your own, when you solved the question? And you can mark more than one. Tell me what all points were you able to extract, and if you weren't able to extract any of these points, then click on 0. Actually, this poll is not going to give me what I'm looking for. Okay, let me change it. Let's talk about this. How many of you were able to click on yes if you were able to get claim number 1? Click on yes if you were able to get claim number 1. If you were not able to get claim number 1, click on 0. Click on no. Okay, so there were 4 of you who weren't able to identify that there are 2 claims about Feb 14 being celebrated as Valentine's Day. Okay, all right. Let's move to claim number 2. Point number 2. Now tell me, how many of you were able to get to point 2 and how many of you were not able to get to point 2? Now point 2 appears to be a little bit harder than point 1. Okay. Now let's talk about point number 3. How many of you were able to get? Again, this is what I'm talking about, is when you solve the question on your own, how many of you were able to get to that? So point number 3 is where half of the class was not, almost 40% of the class was not able to get to point number 3. Okay. All right. Now what I'm going to show you is when we do the error analysis, when we do the answer choice analysis, where point number 3 plays a role into the answer choices. Okay, we're going to talk about that. Points 1 and 2 don't play as much role in you selecting an incorrect answer choice, but point number 3 is the reason why many of you selected wrong answer choice, and I'm going to show that to you. Okay, and when you see that, you are going to see how much important it is to understand each and every aspect of the original sentence, not just a high level view. You need to understand each and every aspect. When you see that, you'll be able to appreciate that when you see that you are confused between two answer choices, it's not the fault of answer choices. It is your fault that you actually missed out on doing the initial steps of the question correctly. Okay, so again, let's talk about that. Again, assigning causality is very, very important. Okay, so if you understood all the 3 points, okay, well and good, you can understand the meaning of a sentence well enough. But if you understood either 1 or 2 points or 0 or 1 point, then you need to first build your skill set in understanding the meaning of the sentence by strategically pausing, which means you need to go through master comprehension course. Okay, so let's continue this. So essentially, nobody selected choice A as the correct answer, which means that everyone was able to understand that there is some sentence structure issue. Really, the verbs don't have associated subjects. Okay. Now we take a look at choice B. Now choice B, choice B was selected by about 5 people. Okay. So what's happening in choice B is that with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration, a few experts do claim. Now this is absolutely nonsensical. A few experts didn't have the ulterior motive. That is not what the sentence said. The ulterior motive was of the church. So this itself, so this part of the sentence is actually communicates incorrect meaning. Okay, and that is why this choice is wrong. The other thing is, a few experts do claim, but the more prevalent belief is it is celebrated. Okay, yeah, this part is fine. These experts claim that the church coined Feb 14th. This does not, okay, the specific motive, yeah, so it's the same thing. Now choice C. Choice C was one of the popular choices. Let's talk about what is wrong with choice C. While a few experts claim that the church coined, their more prevalent belief is that it is celebrated. Now what is it saying? It's saying that the experts' more prevalent belief is that this date is celebrated to honor the anniversary. So this is where this sentence is wrong, because now this there refers to a few experts, which means that this point is not explained correctly by choice C. So everyone who selected choice C, do you see where you faltered? You faltered because you were not able to take the meaning expressed by this point number 3. You didn't take that meaning with you. Essentially, when you're solving, so let me go through choice D as well, because choice D was also a very popular choice. So you were not able to, so for choice C, you were not able to spot the distortion in meaning. And if you didn't, and this happened because you didn't understand the meaning of the choice completely, meaning of the original sentence. Okay. Now this choice is again, church coined the date Feb 14th as Valentine's Day with an ulterior motive to Christianize the celebration as claimed by a few experts. Now again, it's not really clear, as claimed by few experts, what does it modify? Okay, does it modify the action of the church coining, or does it modify the ulterior motive aspect? And that's why this choice is incorrect. The other thing is, the more prevalent belief, it's not really connecting well with anything in the sentence. Okay, so that's why choice D is wrong. Okay, now choice E, which was selected by very few people, is indeed the correct answer choice. Okay, that the church coined the date as Valentine's Day with an ulterior motive is claimed by a few experts, but the more prevalent belief is that it is celebrated on this and this date. Okay, so choice E is the correct answer. Okay, now let me talk about choice E once more here. Why did you reject choice E? For those of you who selected choice E, who selected C, D or B, Why did you reject choice E? That sounded awkward. Okay. Seemed grammatically incorrect, didn't read them all, that parallelism. Okay. Okay, all right. So what we're going to do is, now it's very important. One thing that, okay, so first of all, do all of you agree that utilizing method is the right thing to do? Utilizing the method, meaning-based method, is the right way to go for SC? Because again, it's very important that we understand what are the three things. The three things that are important over here is you need to learn the step-by-step method in order to achieve that mastery of application. Second, and that's what we're going to be talking about, is that you need to learn from the detailed solution. You need to be able to do strategic review of the detailed solutions that we provide you, so that you can improve as you are learning. Okay, and that is where we're going to be talking. That is what we're going to be talking next. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to give you, for each question that you see on the e-GMAT platform, whether it's while you are doing the course, whether it is while you're doing Scholaranium or through mocks, you get these detailed solutions, and these detailed solutions help you master the method. So after you solve a question and review its solution, you need to answer these questions so that you learn from this very question and you apply your learnings to the next question that you solve. And this is very important. Let me ask you this question. How many of you spend about at most 5 minutes to review a solution? At most. How many of you spend at most 5 minutes to review the solution? Okay, 60% of the class spends at most 5 minutes, which means that less than or equal to, less than or equal to 5 minutes, right? If you're doing things the right way, if you want to get to that 90th percentile, okay, you need to spend at least 10 minutes to review each and every solution. Now you may wonder, what do I have to do? What kind of review do you want me to do? Ultimately, whenever I review a solution, all I need to figure out is why did I select why is the choice that I selected incorrect, right? That's all I have to do. Okay, no, that's not all that you have to do. That is just one of the things that you need to do, and that is what you do. That is what we teach you in how to do the strategic review. Okay, now when you're doing strategic review, you have to answer questions after you've done reviewing the solution. After you solve the question, then reviewing the solution, you need to answer these questions. Did I understand all the aspects of the meaning? All being the operative word, not just the gist. Did I understand all the aspects of the meaning presented by the original choice? Okay. Why did I reject the correct choice? Very important. Okay. Right now, when I asked you this question, why did you reject the correct choice? You guys have said certain stuff, right? Now you need to put that into context so that you take that learning with you in the next question that you solve, to the next question that you solve. Was it because you misunderstood some grammatical rule, or was it that there was some weird sentence structure? Okay, any of these could be the correct answer here, right? And why did you select the incorrect choice? Was it because you couldn't identify some meaning issue, or was it because you couldn't apply a grammatical rule correctly? Okay, so again, this is what you need. These are all the questions that you need to answer for each and every question, that you solve. How many of you do this level of analysis today? And be very frank here, okay, because ultimately you have to start doing this level of analysis. Okay, because if you're not doing this today, you're doing yourself a very big disservice. And as Rajat said, and as I started off, 60th percentile, 90th percentile, in terms of your capability, there is no difference at all. There's no difference between the innate capability of a 60th percentile student and a 90th percentile student. Okay, there is no difference in terms of the hard work that a 60th percentile student does versus a 90th percentile student does. The only difference is, how is that hard work being done? Are you doing that hard work in solving thousands of questions, one question after another, or are you doing that hard work in doing strategic review of each and every question that you solve, but you probably are solving 50 to 100 questions? That is the difference. Okay, are you making sure that you are just doing checkbox on the course? Okay, or are you making sure that whatever it is that you're learning the right way, regardless of how many times you have to go through those files? Okay, and whatever you learn, you don't really need to review that again. Okay, so again, that focused effort, what is it that you need to learn is what you have to figure out, and that what happens when you get the feedback. Okay, and I'm going to talk, and that's my third point, and I'll get to that. First, let's talk about the strategic review. Now, what I'm going to do is, we already solved this question. I'm going to show you how, when you are doing this on your own, how will you be doing strategic review of this? Okay. Now, the first question that I'm going to answer is, why did I reject the correct answer? Okay. Really, a number of you said that it was the unfamiliar structure, that subject verb didn't actually make sense, right? So again, you felt it was incorrect. And then there is this other thing as well, that you felt that believe that it is celebrated. You felt that there should have been a that here, but that was missing. Okay, so it could be either of these two, or maybe both of these two. Okay, so again, when you are reviewing the solution, you need, in your error log, you need to make a note of this, or in the notes of this question, you need to make a note over there that I rejected this answer choice because I felt that the sentence structure was not familiar. So I need to make a note of such sentence structures, that these are acceptable structures. Okay. The second reason was, I had the misconception that needs to be there, but it can be omitted. So again, I need to make a note of that. So again, you don't necessarily need to know all these typical constructs right off the bat. That is the job of a good course that has a good selection of questions that are tested on the GMAT, questions that are similar to what are tested on the GMAT. That is what the purpose of a good course is, that to expose you to those sentence structures. Okay, but it's your job to extract that information from the course. Okay, and that's what you end up doing with the strategic review. Now, second thing is, why did you select the incorrect choice as the correct answer? And that's very important. For those of you who selected choice C, you selected choice C because you were not able to observe the change in meaning. Okay, that is very, very important. Okay, for those of you who selected choice D as the correct answer, you weren't able to see that, okay, this is ambiguous. The sentence is not clear. If I simply give this sentence to my audience is going to be confused because it's not very clear. There is ambiguity with what do the few experts claim. Okay, so you really have to be very, very critical of yourself as to why you selected an incorrect answer choice, because that is what you're going to take as feedback into the next set of questions that you solve. Okay, because it's very important for you to now know, okay, I made a mistake here. I didn't notice the meaning distortion. Now, why did you not notice the meaning distortion? We've already addressed that. Whether you got all the aspects of the meaning or not. That's the first thing that you really need to do. Okay, and again, e-GMAT students get detailed framework of how is it that they should be doing this level of strategic review. They get the detailed solutions that enable them to do this level of strategic review. In fact, this level of strategic review is possible only, and I can claim that is possible only if you have detailed solutions. You try doing that with official guide solutions, you won't be able to do that. Okay, and that's the beauty of the system here. We give you detailed solutions for each and every question, including the official questions. Okay, now I'm going to show you how you're going to see what kind of solution you're going to see in Scholaranium platform. This question is from Scholaranium platform. You are going to see all the aspects of the meaning listed out over here, the sentence structure listed out over here. Okay, so now you can compare. Before you even get to the answer choices, you need to compare. Did I get this meaning? Did I get this meaning? Oh, I didn't get this meaning, right? So you need to do that comparison. Okay, and then we move on to the answer choices. Each and every answer choice has detailed explanation of what is wrong. In addition to that, and I know the font over here is not very clear, the absence of that before clause is not an error, because that is used as a connector. It can be kept, because when that is used as a connector, it can be kept understood. So again, you get those misconceptions clarified as well. Okay, that is the level of detail of the solutions that you require in order to do strategic review. And this is, again, when I share the presentation with you, you should take a look at the slide and maybe print out the slide for yourself, so that for every SC question that you do this level of analysis. Did you understand all the aspects or not? Okay, why did you reject the correct choice? Why did you select an incorrect choice? Okay, does this make sense? Yes or no? Okay. Now, what I said was, we've done methods. You all understand the importance of using the right method. You all understand the importance of doing the strategic review. Okay. Now, what I'm going to tell you is, what is the importance of utilizing feedback? Why is feedback important? Okay. Now, one thing is that you have to, the study plans that we provide you with, right, they are personalized, they're customized to your starting and your target abilities, okay, because each one of you starts at a different level, each one of you has a different, decide for a different target ability based on what you feel your strengths are, right. Now, that's a study plan, right, that gives you the starting points, that gives you the end point. Now, how do you go from those starting points to those end points? What is that journey? That journey is something that the system gives you information on. Okay, the course is established, the course has fixed components. Now, whether, let's say, you have a verbs file, whether you should be doing that verbs file once or twice, that depends on how well you understood that verbs concept file. Okay, whether you need to do modifiers file on verbs ing once or twice or thrice, that depends on whether you got it the first time or not. Now, how do you know whether you got it or not? It's not subjective. It's very objective, and that is possible because we have quizzes before and after each concept file. Okay, and because you have those quizzes, you get that feedback right there and then as to what is your level of comfort with that small verbs topic. What is that level of comfort with that verb ing modifiers concept? Okay, and you need to take that feedback seriously. Yesterday, I was talking to a student who said that I'm done with the SC course, and I told her, no, you're not done with your SC course. You still have 60% scores in so many of these files, and you haven't spent enough time on the system, so you are definitely not done with the SC course. Getting done with the SC course doesn't mean that you have check boxes after every concept file. No. Getting done with SC course means that you have good scores in concept files, in practice files, in application files. Getting done with SC course means you have spent good amount of time. If I see that you have a lower score, which tells me that, okay, you have actually taken that feedback seriously. And let me give you some examples over here. Okay. Okay, I'm going to skip this part here. Okay, let's take an example of Sahil. Okay, this is his dashboard. Now, if you take a look at it, Sahil faltered over here in the application file. He got 60% score. Okay, but look at the amount of time that he spent on this file. He spent 47 minutes on this file. And there are 5 questions in each application file. There are 5 questions that are there to tell you how is it that you apply the method to solve the questions that test you on these concepts. Okay. Now, on 5 questions, he spent more than 46 minutes. Okay, which means that he made sure that he is reviewing the solutions in excruciating detail. Okay, and what was the result of that? The result of that was, in the next practice file, which also has about 5 to 7 questions, he scored 100%. Okay, so essentially you put in the effort and you see the results of that effort right next to it. Okay, that is when you're taking, that is what I mean by taking the feedback. Somebody asked me, what are these feedback points? These are your feedback points, the scores that you're getting. Okay, and these are not just in any scores. This 100% tells me that you understand the concept of subject verb agree number very well. This 60% tells me that you have some issues with your meaning understanding of when it comes to subject verb makes sense. Okay, so these are very, very modular. You're getting feedback on a very modular level. Give me one course, give me one book that can give you this feedback that yes, you know subject verb agree number, but you don't know as well, you're not as comfortable when it comes to that subject verb makes sense. Okay, words that change number, Sahil is very comfortable with that particular concept. When you get this level of feedback, that's when you get that confidence, yes, you are learning in the right way. When you get this feedback that, okay, when Sahil got this feedback that he wasn't able to answer these questions correctly, he took that feedback seriously and he went back, reattempted the file, spent more effort on the file, and the result of that was evident here. And this is the case across the board, not just with the subject verb file. Let's take a look at verbs. Now, when I take a look at verb sequencing, look at the amount of time that he spent. There are 5 questions in this file. He spent more than an hour on just these 5 questions. Okay, look at the scores, 83%. Okay, verbs application file, again 5 questions, upwards of 50 minutes there. Okay, now verbs practice quiz. Now you would wonder, okay, if he did well here, why did he falter here? 64%. And how did he, take care of that part here? Again, what he did was he bookmarked these questions that he got wrong, and he went back into these questions that he got wrong to revise them. That is the level of feedback that I'm talking about. Okay, and the number of feedback points that I talked about, they don't even include these at the modular level. These are the question level feedback that you get. Now, the difference between a 68th percentile student and a 98th percentile student is, a 68th percentile student would say, oh, so what if I got 60%? It's okay. I'm going to improve in the next one, as if some magic is going to happen in the next one. No, magic doesn't happen. You need to put in the effort. Okay, 68th percentile student is going to say, okay, is going to look at this question and say, oh, I made a silly mistake. Oh, I missed on this. He's not going to spend 5 to 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes reviewing why did I make the mistake. Okay, 68th percentile student is going to simply leave it up to chance, leave it up to the next questions that he's going to solve. Okay, that is the difference. Now, how many of you relate yourself with how Sahil did the preparation, okay, wherein he took the feedback points seriously? You need to have a system that supports you in doing that. It's not you as an individual. You need to have a system that gives you this level of feedback. Okay. Now, if the system gives you that level of feedback and you still choose not to use it, then you are at fault. But if you don't have that system, then again, you need to now realize that, okay, this is the system that you require in order to improve to that 90th percentile. Okay. So again, Sahil, he got V38. He took feedback seriously. He took corrective actions at the right time. And this is what he writes in his debrief. For me, the biggest thing regarding SC was application of concepts. My concepts were not bad in attempts 1 and 2. And again, he took GMAT 3 times. But I lacked the knowledge of application of the same. Concepts can narrow down the options from 5 to 2. And that's what happens for difficult questions. You may be down to 2 or 3 choices. But after that, it's the application of the concepts that plays a game-changing role. And that's what we saw over here, right? Okay, so with Sahil's story, what we have seen is how is it that you take feedback in stage 1, right? When you are learning the concepts, okay? Now, how do you cement? How do you take feedback when you are cementing methods utilizing Scholaranium? And for that, I'm going to utilize example of how Rohit Malan reached 90th percentile in sentence correction, and he got V41, and you can take a look at his YouTube interview. Now, Rohit, when he was doing stage 1, again, Rajat has talked about stages of preparation. So when Rohit did stage 1, he made sure that he got 90% in all the application files. Only in 1 out of the 23 application files was a score below 70th percentile. So what this tells you is that when he was going through this, he did all the right things. He took all the right feedback, right? He took the corrective actions wherever needed. And so he was able to get to that 70th percentile. Now, once he got to that 70th percentile the right way, when he got to Scholaranium to cement, he just needed to solve 80 questions. That's it. No more than that. Okay. And what he did was he first solved medium questions and he got more than he got the right level of accuracy, and then he solved hard questions, and that's all he needed to do. And that's the beauty of doing things the right way. Because he was at 70th percentile after going through stage 1, he had a very solid launch pad, and which meant that from 70th to 90th, he did not need to solve hundreds of questions. He needed to solve only 80 questions to get to that level. That is the beauty of doing things the right way. And that's the power of data. The data tells you where do you need to focus. Okay. So again, your e-GMAT course is effective not just because, this is what he said, right? Yeah. It's effective because it gives you insights on areas where you need to improve upon, and it provides tools that help you personalize your journey. Okay. So again, summarizing the whole thing, there are these stages of learning. You need to be doing each stage in the right manner so that you can get to that 90th percentile. And for each stage, just make sure that you are taking the feedback from the system very, very carefully. Okay. So stage 1, you need to focus on methods. Stage 1, you need to utilize the detailed solution to do strategic review. Stage 1, you need to take the feedback seriously and take corrective actions right there and then. For stage 2, again, you continue building your methods. You continue utilizing detailed solutions to do strategic review, and you continue taking feedback. Okay, if you do that the right way, there is no reason why you won't be able to get to a 90th percentile. Okay. Okay, somebody wanted to see the summary slide. Here is the summary slide. All right. So with this, we have come to the end of this session. And I would like to hear from you. What did you learn from the session? Let me get my poll here. So tell me, what have you learned from the session? How are you going to utilize the learnings from this session in your prep? And as you are doing focused approach on application and reviewing mistakes, and how will you do that? I understood the right way to prepare. Very good. And I'm going to be sharing the PDF with you as well. Okay, let's read this. Strategic pausing plus meaning is greater than splits. Good. Timely feedback during prep is important. Very good. I'm glad that you recognize that. How the quality matters more than quantity. Knew my shortfalls in such a short time. Very good. I'm very glad to hear that. You guys are making my day, my weekend is starting at a very, very high note here. I'm very stressed and I fear to fail. Fakel is telling me that. Okay. All right. So let me read some more here. Better learning. Okay. Good. Very nice. Let me share the PDF as well over here. There you go. Here's the PDF. You can download that. I have some questions here. What is stage 1 and stage 2? So Ravi, stage 1 is, and I can share some videos with you about the 3 stages of learning. Sandeep, if you can pull that video, that would be nice. Stage 1 is when you're learning the concepts and methods. Stage 2 is when you cement those concepts and methods utilizing Scholaranium, and stage 3 is when you start doing test readiness. Okay, so for every subsection you need to go through these stages. Now what stage you are in depends, for each subsection depends on your study plan, and that is what the study plan tells you, that should you be starting SC from stage 1 or should you be starting SC from stage 2. Okay, so again, knowing, and that's the whole point of personalizing your course. Okay, so that is and that is enabled by you taking Sigma X mock test, so that you get those subsectional abilities. Okay. All right. What else? Is it possible for me as an architect to go ahead and do MBA in finance? Absolutely. Why not? That's a career changer, absolutely. I'm very stressed and I fear to fail. Write to us at support@e-gmat.com so that we can help you out. If you are stressed, if you are stressed, that means you just don't have the right path to your success. Okay, so it's all about, again, think about it. GMAT is a problem that you need to solve, right? Whenever you need to solve a problem, you need to break it down into smaller chunks so that it's more easy for you to approach a smaller problem and then you move on to the next one, right? So again, if you're stressed out, it means you still don't have the right solution, or a solution that's granular enough that you get a solid handle on it. Okay, so again, it's a project that you have to plan really well. Okay, so again, write to us so that we can help you out here. Do I need to go to Scholar Union every time or only after completing section like SC once? Only after you complete one subsection. Okay, so good question, Rajdeep. You need to do, you need to first do, depending upon your plan, depending upon the sequence, you start with SC, then you go through the stage. Let's say you are in stage 1 of SC, you go through stage 1, finish stage 1, then you move on to stage 2. Okay, so after completing a subsection, then you move to stage 2 of that subsection, which is done using Scholarium. How can I start with GMAT using e-GMAT? Just purchase the course and you're going to get detailed instructions of how is it that you get started. Typically, the first step is for you to create a personalized study plan. If you have already taken the GMAT, then you can order in your ESR and get your subsectional abilities from there as a starting point for your study plan. If not, then you simply take a Sigma X mock test and you basically get your subsectional abilities. You get started with that, and then we guide you throughout your GMAT journey. And if at any time you have questions, just send us an email. And somebody asked me, Gautam asked me, why is it termed as Sigma X mock test? It's a shortened form of simulated insightful GMAT experience. Okay, so again, simulated because it is simulated, insightful because it offers the insights that not even the official mocks offer you, and GMAT experience because it simulates the GMAT experience. So that's why Sigma X mock test. Okay. Should I practice with time limits from the beginning, or should I begin with analyzing the question? There should be no time limits in stage 1. Absolutely not. And again, as you go through the onboarding that we do, we are going to be helping you understand what is it that, when is it that you need to start timing yourself. You need to start timing yourself as a rule of thumb when you get to stage 2. In stage 1, you shouldn't even worry about the timing. And again, the reason for that is when you are, let's say you're learning a new skill, okay, then whenever you're learning a new skill, you don't start to do, you don't start to put yourself under any timing constraints when you are in the learning process. That's what you are in stage 1. So definitely no timer there. Okay, all right, so I think that's about it. I have answered almost all the questions that are there. So are there any discounts going on? Just write to us at support@e-gmat.com so that we can look at the discounts that are happening. I am not aware of the discounts, frankly. That's my sales department that deals with that. Just one thing regarding accessing the webinar. Okay, let's see. I'm still waiting for the person to finish the question. Okay, so Gautam, I guess you couldn't access it through, I don't know what UN and PW means. Can you send us an email at support@e-gmat.com and we'll help you out with that? Okay, all right then. So it was wonderful being with you on this Saturday morning. Wish you all the very best for your preparation, and just let us know how we can help you. Again, preparing for GMAT should be a fun experience, and yes, I'm saying fun experience. Anything that you're learning becomes a fun experience if you plan your preparation the right way, if you know what is the right way of preparing. And anything that you are learning, if it's not done the right way, if you don't have a right mechanism to learn that, it becomes a very laborious job. Okay, so again, think about any skill that you recently built or you built in few years back. Okay, if you have had a good teacher, a good way to learn, if you had a solid methodology, then learning that skill was really very enjoyable. Versus if the teacher wasn't good, you didn't really have a solid terminology, solid methodology, then learning that skill was hard, and in fact, you may not have even gotten to that skill level. Right, so again, just write to us so that we can help you out. It should be fun experience for you. If it's not, just write to us. Okay. All right then. Good luck and have a nice weekend. Bye bye.